Welcome to All Wheel Driven, a podcast by Audi Club North America, where we explore all things Audi and the incredible people who bring it to life. All Wheel Driven is presented by XPEL, the official paint protection film of Audi Club.
What's up, everyone? Zach Miller here from Audi Club North America, and we're out in beautiful Central California to check out this new car behind me. It's the brand new 2026 Audi Q3, launching new this year for the third generation of the entry-level luxury crossover from Audi. And in today's video, we're going to focus on answering 4 key questions. 1, is it a substantial improvement over the prior generation Q3? 2, of course, how does it drive? 3, what are its weak points or any downsides? And finally, would I buy one if I was in the market for a luxury entry-level crossover like the Q3? So with that in mind, let's get started and show you everything there is to know about the brand new Q3. Hope you enjoy. So before we get behind the wheel, let's just take a moment and really take in all of the new design details of this generation of the Q3, because this is, of course, a ground-up redesign of the car, inside and out. It's brand new. And of course, here shown in the standard body configuration, which is the only option for North America, there is a Sportback model overseas with a more sloped roofline, but the Q3 only comes in this sole configuration. And of course, that means you get the more traditional silhouette, which looks very nice from the side. You can see it kind of has this pinch design from the roofline, where it does still kind of taper down a little bit towards that D-pillar. And below that, you can see the rocker panel lines that sort of start making their way upwards toward that belt line as you get towards the rear tires. Another noticeable design feature that Audi fans will recognize is the Audi Q3 make and model being etched into the B-pillar panels there. Of course, we have brand new wheel designs here. This is the optional 20-inch wheel design, looking very nice. Of course, that is the premium package. The standard wheels are 18-inch. You can get 19 or 20s like you see here. At the rear, though, moving along, you see a lot of new things happening back here. You see taillight designs that are split and sort of reminiscent or inspired by the recent reveal of the C9 generation A6. So you can see the running lights and the taillights are actually up here in this larger component. And of course, there's some lighting signature elements that dance around when you unlock and lock the vehicle, both in the front and the rear. But the taillight itself is actually housed here alongside the reflector units you can see. And then this element that you see here, of course, is a full width light bar, part of the running light signature at the rear end that extends the full width of the vehicle. Additionally, when you have your headlights on, the Audi badge here turns on as well to illuminate in red along with the rest of the lighting signature. You can see the Q3 badge placed in its traditional spot there. And this color, by the way, is a beautiful new shade called Sage Green. We can see the rest of the other side looking, again, very similar to the profile we're expecting from a Q3, but of course brought in and modernized to align with the rest of Audi's Q lineup, specifically models like the Q4 e-tron, Q6 e-tron, the new generation of the Q5. Up front is where you can see a lot of that incorporated. So again, you have the wider, larger grille with the black Audi badge placed near the top of the center there, hiding the radar sensors and such for the ADAS systems behind it. And you see these much thinner lighting signatures up front as well, still sort of in a split manner, but less obvious than the rear, because you have your headlights here, and then you have your thin DRLs and running lights up there above them, which again have a unique lighting signature to them when you depart and arrive for the vehicle. And they also have signatures you can customize in the MMI interface. Beyond that, of course, we have some other openings here for cooling and lower valence areas there below the main grille. And you do have this interesting, not quite really a panel gap, but just an intentional sort of gap from where the clamshell hood sort of comes down onto the top end of the front bumper area there. That's pretty interesting because it's not flush. But overall, I think it's a pretty nice design. Maybe a bit generic is the only thing you could say against it. It's definitely not a bad looking car. Personally, I think the rear angle is the weakest point. Just not really quite sold on the split taillight design here in the back. But otherwise, very nice looking, fully refined, and of course, much improved and modernized from the outgoing Q3, which has been around in its second gen since 2019. So with that in mind, let's get behind the wheel of the new Q3 and see how it shakes down on some California roads. All right, so we're out here driving the new third generation of the Audi Q3. brand new for 2026, continues the success of one of Audi's most successful selling models, their entry-level crossover here in the North American market, of course. And very interested to try this out because I have spent a lot of seat time behind the prior generation of the Q3 as my Audi dealer, and all Audi dealers have a ton of those in their loaner fleets. So feel like I know that car pretty well. And right off the bat, I can tell the new Q3 is really refined, not just in its driving performance, which we'll talk about, but overall just the feel of it. The ride feels a lot softer, more comfortable, quieter. I always felt the prior generation Q3 was kind of loud in its power delivery and just a lot of road noise and tire noise, and just overall, the power delivery wasn't as crisp. This already feels like a huge improvement, and I'm just in comfort mode right now driving on the highway. But let's get into the specifics of the powertrain. So it continues what was the volume engine for the prior gen. The entry-level Q3 that we once had with a lower power output is now gone because the sales numbers just didn't support it. But now that means we continue with the sole powertrain in the US being the 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder. Quattro all-wheel drive is standard. And now we have the 7-speed S-tronic dual clutch transmission, which is pretty cool because the last one was an 8-speed tip torque converter auto. So we're getting some of that dual clutch Audi transmission tech from the higher models trickling down into the entry-level Q3, which is always good to see. And of course, that means you get a very smooth drive with very rapid and efficient shifts, and overall just a smoother driving experience in general. And then the power has gone up as well, which is the big talking point for this generation, because now with the new Q3, they are actually class leading in terms of power and performance. The power is at 255 horsepower, 273 torque, which is like 22 to 25 increase respectively compared to the outgoing model. And with the Quattro all-wheel drive, it gets you to 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds, which that's nothing to laugh at. I mean, this is ultimately a volume-selling entry-level crossover that is going to be sold all across, cities and suburbs. It doesn't need to be a high-level performer or anything like that, but that's 0 to 60 times that you get in some, entry-level sports cars or even older Audi S4s, right? And now we have it in a Q3. So that's really cool. Gives you a driving experience that you can really feel has been leveled up compared to the outgoing Q3, because again, this is their entry-level model. After the A3, this is the next most expensive Audi you can buy in the US. So it's a car that is important. It obviously brings a lot of people into the brand, and they needed to, make a statement when they release a new generation. And we're out here driving at some speed, and again, can definitely tell the wind noise is reduced. There's thicker glass. You can tell that they've just invested a lot in the engineering of the sound insulation to make the drive just feel more luxurious and up to speed with consumers' expectations and in line with other competitors. So it doesn't really feel, as entry level or pared back and decontented as the Q3 once did. The new Q3 is also more spacious than the outgoing model. Of course, as usual, like you'd expect, it did grow a bit in size and weight. It's a little bit taller, wider, longer. Wheelbase has been stretched out a bit, but ultimately that translates to more room for interior occupants and also a little bit better cargo room. And in the US, we are just going to continue getting the standard body style of the Q3 SUV that we've known. Overseas, they get the Sportback. That is not yet confirmed as being any planned variant for the US. But of course, the standard variant gets maximum cargo capacity, so that's a plus. You still get split folding rear seats in a 40-20-40 configuration, so that you can have any sort of combination of interior occupants and cargo that you may need as you drive along. Yeah, the car just overall feels like a massive improvement over the old model. They learned from the last model that the volume seller was this 2-liter engine. They're all going to have Quattro, so you really just get yourself one Q3 experience at the end of the day, but you can pick up to 7 different packages as you spec out your model, and they're fully independent packages that you can spec. You don't have to be gated behind one or the other. So of course you have 18-inch wheels as standard. You can opt for 19 or 20-inch wheels. We're riding on the Sport Design 20-inch, but besides that, of course, you can also get the driver assistance package. You can get the black optic package, which adds, the black exterior accents to the mirror housing and roof rails and things like that they've been offering on most Audi models for quite some time now. But the driver assistance package is also a pretty popular volume selling point for the Q3. They found most people were buying it in the old model, and it comes with, in addition to the suite of standard safety equipment you get which of course, lots of different cameras and sensors and front collision avoidance and adaptive cruise control, everything you'd expect. But that driver assistance pack just unlocks a little bit more for you. So you get the lane centering, basically full, almost self-driving on the highway. For divided highways, you can have it keep you in your lane while you're using the adaptive cruise control. You can have it do the lane changes for you as you indicate with the turn signal. And then that assistance package also gives you a top-down 360 camera that you can use, when you're maneuvering in lots and garages and whatever. And it also gives you a heated steering wheel. So they threw that feature into the driver assistance pack as an option. Heated seats is standard, and all the other updated MMI tech and the large screens, both for the fully virtual cockpit in front of your steering wheel and the center screen, much larger than before and very well integrated, I must say, compared to the prior gen Q3. And of course, the MMI tech, the design and functionality itself is all new. So you have redesigned, graphics and just kind of a more intuitive layout. It feels a bit more modern, easier to navigate with the touchscreen or with your controls on the wheel as well. You can, opt for different views and such in your virtual cockpit, as any Audi owner would be familiar with. All right, so I'm out here driving on a highway stretch here with the radar cruise set. And again, this car is fully equipped, so we've got the driver assistance package for an additional $1,250 added onto this car. But of course, you need to keep your hands on the wheel in case you have to re-engage or anything. So after a little bit of time, you will get a little yellow icon here in the gauge cluster that says, please take over. All you have to do is put your hands back on the wheel because it's a touch sensor. So if your hands, finger, whatever, are on any part of the wheel, it will recognize you're there. You don't have to wiggle the wheel to satisfy a torque sensor or something like that, like you used to have to do in previous driver assistance or radar cruise systems like this. So that's very nice to use, of course. Great on highway driving and works as flawlessly as you'd expect. But yeah, the car overall is very comfortable at speed, going over some older pavement here with some rough patches and bumps and not too much tire slap or anything like that. Very compliant ride. And the shifts as you go through an overtake or an on-ramp or off-ramp or something, very smooth from that dual clutch transmission as you'd expect from Audi. It is genuinely a noticeable improvement over the old Tiptronic Auto that was in the prior gen of the Q3. So always good to see that, of course, Audi are not only investing in their more entry-level models like the Q3, but part of that involves tech and other equipment and powertrain capabilities trickling down from the more expensive models. Dual clutch all around for nice snappy shifts here, still in dynamic mode, so we can punch it a bit and feel the shifts carried out effortlessly, overall giving you a very refined and compliant driving experience. And there's a lot of curvy roads here now that we're going through with elevation change and articulating pavement, and you don't feel like the car is ever too upset or losing its footing or experiencing any sort of abnormal body roll. The steering feels very on point. The brakes feel good. Overall, a very enjoyable car to drive. Would be great on a road trip, as equally comfortable as any daily driving duties in and around town or a city. Again, the quiet aspect of the driving experience is something I notice a lot coming from the old Q3, where you felt like a lot of the outside noise and the outside world, not to mention the engine noise itself, would be bleeding into the powertrain. And here we test those brakes a bit, feeling very nice, and the dynamic steering kicking in there as I made that direct 90-degree right turn. Didn't have to do any excessive turning or hand over hand there. Was pretty straightforward. So that makes a very nice, smooth, and calm driving experience as well. We're in a hillier part of the drive now, so I have put it into the dynamic mode to get a little bit more out of it. We're on some pretty tight turns here, and of course, not a huge amount of body roll. This isn't a massive, tall vehicle or overly heavy vehicle by any means, but it feels very nice and planted. Steering feels very good. This is Audi's new, basically dynamic steering ratio system that they've been putting in some new cars, including this new Q3, which basically means on higher speed highway drives and such, your steering inputs can be minimal and not have any sort of jerky movements as you're driving through. But of course, that translates to less hand-over-hand motions and less lock-to-lock turns when you're doing tighter drives or going into a turn at an intersection or whatever. The car will progressively turn in more as you turn the wheel without it having to be a one-to-one with your hand going through the steering motions, which of course improves your usability and just, makes the car, behave a little bit more dynamically depending on the scenario you're in and how much steering input you need to use. So it feels very nice out here on these twisty California roads that we're going through in the hills. I don't really have to have any sort of uncertainty or vagueness in what the front wheels are going to do and where the car is going to be positioned based on the amount of input I'm giving the wheel. But yeah, it drives really nice and smooth. That's, again, the first impression I got compared to the outgoing model is just how much more refined this feels. This feels like it's at the level now of its bigger brothers, the Q5, Q6, Q7. It feels like it has a certain solidity to it in terms of how it drives, how it handles undulation and changes in braking and throttle input. The silence and the overall calmness of the Drive 2 being, of course, that this is a Q3. This isn't the RS Q3 that they've sold in prior gens. This is, the volume seller that's going to be just taking people to and from work, shuttling their family around, doing day-to-day activities, and it feels like you're not in an actual, entry-level luxury car. It feels like it's true to the Audi name and what you'd expect from their bigger cars, and it presents a pretty good value, right? I mean, this starts at $43,700. As tested, we're in a car with the 20-inch wheels and all the packages, so it gets us up to $51K all in. In no world is that not a good chunk of money, but compared to the competition, it's pretty well in line, especially with the class-leading performance and power, right? In order to get 0 to 60 times that are near this or under, you have to be stepping up to stuff like the AMG 35 variant of the GLA Mercedes, or the M Sport variants of the BMW X1. So for the performance you're getting, along with the updated technology, features that have started trickling down, and just overall refinement of this new generation, you're getting a lot for your money compared to the outgoing model, which all in all, base to base price, you're looking at like a $4,000 increase, which, of course, there's always gonna be increases generation to generation, looking at what you're pulling in, looking at the new design and the features and the refinement. But that seems totally on the market, on the money for me, given the market and what other competitors are out there. And again, you can equip it anywhere in that range, right? So if you just want your standard Q3 and you want the driver assistance pack and maybe the black optic pack, you're still gonna be somewhere in that in the mid to upper $40,000 price range all in. Now, of course, the other big question I want to start answering out here on this experience with the Q3 are, what are its drawbacks, right? No car is perfect. I think from a dynamic perspective, I haven't really found anything I can fault it on so far. It feels, again, every bit as you'd expect to drive. There's nothing overly, unrefined or vague about your inputs. So the driving experience actually, I think, beat my expectations, if I'm being honest, just because of all the time I've spent in the prior Q3s that, came from years past in prior generations where entry-level luxury cars were a bit more decontented than they are today. And, to some extent they could get away with that, but that's not the case anymore. This has to be a strong performer, and it's definitely succeeded in that department for the driving experience. I'd say design and material use is probably the sections that this falls a little bit short for me. The design on the exterior, let's start there. It does feel certainly like a sophisticated improvement over the old Q3. However, I think that comes with it looking a little bit more generic than we've come to expect from Audi as a brand. And it's a weird thing because it does definitely, the design ethos and the elements and the silhouette, I think actually, this is not a bad looking car. They overall look pretty good, honestly, in my opinion. This is all subjective, of course, so it's hard to really call this a true fault, but this is just from my perspective. I think the design could have been a bit more distinctive and sharper in some ways. I definitely look at this in some angles where you might not see the badge, or if you cover up the badge, to me it sort of looks like some other cars out there, some other crossovers, both in America and outside of our market. The first thing that actually came to my mind with this was the Buick Envision. That itself is sort of in this same segment from a lower tier luxury brand, of course. It's not a direct competitor, nor is it even an ugly car either. But again, it's just a little bit on the generic side that the Buick Envision is, and I feel like this is a little bit closer to that. I also saw elements of like Ford Escape in some angles, or the old Infiniti QX50. And again, I'm bringing up cars here that are sort of in the class, but generally not direct competitors or much cheaper. So I don't know if, prior Audi owners will like the fact that it has some of those design similarities in its silhouette and overall features on the outside. Again, subjective, up for you to decide. Then material use on the inside, I do think the overall interior design is very much improved. The old Q3 felt very kind of Spartan, even in semi-equipped variants, and it had a lot of it had a lot of hard touch points in the center console, around the dash. It just kind of felt a step below what you would get above that with Q5s and other models, but that's not the case anymore. I think there's a very good mix of materials in this car. However, there are some low points. In the center console, there's a lot more piano black plastic than you'd like to see. Again, maybe some people aren't bothered by this, and it's something we've kind of come to expect from really all cars, even at higher price points, do this, right? I just don't love it because it's super prone to scratching and fingerprints and dust and all that stuff. So, it is what it is. But they have, freed up space because they've moved the shifter column from the center to a more modern, column integrated design here that is connected with a bunch of other controls, which actually is pretty neat and functions pretty well. It's the first Audi to have this new sort of control panel that sort of hugs the steering column side to side. So there's a lot of new stuff in here that is good. But I think the steering wheel, its design and material implementation is probably the weakest point, which is unfortunate because that's the part you're ultimately touching the most, obviously. I think the new Audi logo and badge integration on the wheel is pretty weak. It just feels super flat and basic. It almost feels like in pictures, if you look at it from a distance, it almost looks like one of those stickers you would throw on your laptop or something. That's what it reminds me of, and that's not good. You want it to feel like a thick, weighty, tactical piece of badging there that you can see and interact with, and the lighting hits it in different points, right? So I don't love that. Again, this isn't a surprise. They're doing this across the range right now with the updated A6 and A5 and the Q5. So it's carried over, it's consistent. That's why it's here. I just don't love it across the range. So, a fault of Audi, more broadly speaking, I guess, not a fault of the Q3 in particular. But, that is the wheel design that they've used here for their new cars. And the other point is that the steering wheel controls on your left or right thumb points here are just these big haptic piano black panels that are not great to use. I'm never generally a fan of haptic controls on or around your steering wheel because they're just far too easy to swipe and hit something accidentally as you're turning or just resting your palm somewhere. So I'd much rather them be tactical units with actual neural rocker switches and dials and things like that, or at least individual buttons. But they are basically just these two left and right piano black panels that when you press either of the buttons, whether you're changing the volume, turning on your heated wheel, navigating the virtual cockpit, whatever you're doing, it just doesn't feel like a super nice luxury feedback point there in terms of how the button itself feels on your finger, but then also the feedback it gives you when you press it, especially because when you do press it, the whole panel, so if you press the center button, the corner button, whatever you're pressing, the whole thing moves and indents inward when you're pressing it, which these are very nitpicky things, but ultimately that doesn't feel super luxurious to me. Audi has always been known for having very good tactical feedback and fit and finish with their interior controls, and everything that you press or switch or turn feels very tactical, and it gives you a very solid click or turn or whatever it is. And you just don't get that on these wheels, on the steering wheel. Same with the paddle shifters that are here, of course, which, you're probably hardly going to use paddle shifters in a Q3, but if you wanted to, you could, and they're just kind of basic plastic, nothing too, exciting to feel or to pull on. That's about the extent of it. Everything else feels very good. One thing that is interesting to get used to, which makes perfect sense from an ergonomic standpoint, but is a bit interesting if you're not used to it. The central gauge cluster screen in front of your steering wheel is, of course, the virtual cockpit design that Audi's been using for generations now, but it doesn't fully fill the screen area or the bezel. So you have a lot of dead space of just black non-screen stuff around this integrated panel that the screen sits within. But Audi, of course, have thought about that. They've done this intentionally so that when you're driving, the entire width and then the whole area of that virtual cockpit is perfectly visible to you in between the steering wheel spokes while you're driving, so that nothing is getting blocked. If they did fill out that entire screen, parts of your wheel around 10 and 2 o'clock would be blocking the screen, creating not such a great user experience, of course. So it makes sense because I can see everything top to bottom, left to right. None of it's blocked. It is a very good user experience from that standpoint, just for the visibility of it. But it is a bit weird because then you have this area in between the two screens, the center and the virtual cockpit, and just above and around it that's just blank. Kind of looks a bit odd, like maybe there's something that's supposed to be there and it isn't, but that's just what they've done here. I am also happy to say that the material mix on the dashboard and the door panels is very nice, and it has a good variety. There's sort of this like soft cloth, like I don't know what to call it, but it's a very nice like fabric material that they've integrated into really the upper half of the door panel and the upper half of the dash before it hits the black part facing the windshield. And then there's also this very expansive piece of wood trim that starts basically from the driver's side, extending all the way to the passenger side, which is the largest they've ever put in a Q3. And you have a little bit more here left of your wheel. It feels very nice, looks nice. And again, it just makes a nice mix of materials compared to the old model that was just kind of hard plastics and leather throughout without much variety to it. And then, of course, you do have your contrasting leather here in this particular spec with the beige interior and beige headliner, black leather, black upper door panel leather, and stuff like that. So it overall feels like a very cohesive mix of materials. And the door panel itself also does have the more, I guess you could call like traditional controls in terms of your power mirror adjustment, your power windows, your child locks. They are all individual switches and buttons and knobs. Unlike the bigger new generation models like the Q5, they have that massive piano black panel that is sort of integrated to the door pull, which has been causing a lot of controversy because it's like a weird ergonomic placement, and just also similar to the steering wheel buttons that I complained about, doesn't have the best of functionality, fit and finish, or luxurious feel to it. So I guess they're considering that something that will be in the upper models. It's not here on the Q3 yet, but owners might enjoy that because you get a more traditional experience here of controlling everything on your driver door, and also just is presented very nicely as well. I do also really love this panel that I mentioned with the controls behind the steering wheel that takes the place of your central column shifter. It's moved up here on the right, and it also takes the place of two stalks, really, the turn signal stalk and the wiper stalk, typically being separate stalks on your wheel, are now fully integrated on the left-hand side, where you can control everything. Your front and rear wipers, your wiper spray, your turn signals, your brights, everything is there for you within a finger's reach, and you really can reach it with ease with your fingers while keeping your hands on the wheel, which is great because, of course, that just, again, improves the experience, feels a little bit more seamless, and also has some safety benefits. So it's nice to see that. Everyone was a bit interested to see what that functionality would look like, because in pictures, of course, it was brand new and everyone was like, what is going on with these controls? But I think they actually integrated it quite well. Audi hasn't confirmed yet with us if they're going to start implementing similar controls for the steering wheel stock in their future models, but we shall see. And they actually have very nice force feedback and tactical feel to them. When you hit the indicator and the wipers, everything feels very precise and well weighted and with a satisfying click. And it does have piano black on it, but I think that's actually an okay, integration of it there. It doesn't look too out of place or excessive. So we are in some really twisty parts of the route now, if you can't tell from the background whizzing by behind me. And this feels really good. Honestly, like I can't remember a time I had this much fun and also just confidence in driving something like a Q3. I'm not like driving the wheels off it necessarily, but I'm throwing it into these corners that are pretty sharp and have a lot of uneven pavement, and it's handling it very well with confidence. And it doesn't feel like it's overstraining the engine or the transmission or the brakes or the steering. It all feels very well composed and very tight. And look at the steering rate. I mean, the steering inputs are really coming, the dynamic steering that they added is really coming into shine here, because I'm keeping my hands right at 9 and 3, and no matter how sharp this gets, I'm just able to keep it locked in and let that dynamic steering rack do its thing. As I increase my inputs, it shrinks the turning radius. And again, everything just feels so smooth and composed. No jerkiness from the transmission. We're in dynamic mode, of course, but in any driving mode that I've used so far, it feels what you'd expect from a well-engineered dual clutch. I mean, hardly anyone that buys this car is going to drive it on roads like this, or even in this, behavior in dynamic mode if they do come across a road like this. But if you do, it can handle it. Makes you wonder, what might a future Audi SQ3 look like? Or, oh man, if we got the RS Q3 from Europe, how cool would that be? They've had that for the first 2 generations of the Q3 overseas, never brought it to America, but I think you've got a strong starting point for the platform here. If they bring it back for the new gen, we can only hope they might give it to us here in America. Oh yeah, there's a nice downwards snake trail here that we're going through. Very nice. So we're on a bit of a straight section here in dynamic mode. Feels good, power delivery is strong. Again, powertrain noise is not that overbearing. I can hammer on it, again, in dynamic mode pretty good here, and not get a ton of engine noise bleeding into the cabin, which can take away from that, luxury feel, and also just kind of make you think that, oh my God, this 2-liter turbo is working so hard to, make this pass or get me onto this on-ramp. But I don't get that impression here. It feels very nice, feels like it's not overstraining itself, feels in its element. And again, we're on the 20-inch wheels, the biggest wheel you can get in dynamic mode. I'm not on a rough road or anything by any stretch, but it feels good. It's not beating you up. You're not feeling everything. Totally what you'd expect from a comfortable daily driver, even in its highest, sportiest driving mode setting. And we're back from our drive in the all-new Q3. And I must say, I'm very impressed. This car beat my expectations. From the entry-level crossover that Audi sells, I wasn't really expecting anything revolutionary or shocking. But this car, to answer our initial question, is actually a huge improvement over the outgoing Q3, which makes sense. It's going to be a volume seller. They really put everything at it to make it modern in terms of its technology suite, its options and different offerings. Of course, the styling and updated lighting signatures, wheel options, and everything else. But it really is just a much more composed and compliant ride, a lot more comfortable than the old Q3, and a lot quieter on the road at speed when going over rough pavement. The powertrain doesn't bleed into the cabin as much as it has in some older Q3s. So I left feeling pretty impressed, honestly. And if this is what they're able to do with just the Q3, before any potential SQ3 or RSQ3 comes out, I think we have a lot more to look forward to there, because this is already a very competent performer. Now, how does it drive? Again, adding to the overall expectations here, or that I came away with, it drives really well. It had no business taking some of the roads and corners that we threw at it as well as it did today. It felt entirely confident and compliant, no excessive body roll, never felt like it was uncomfortable doing what I asked of it. And the new dual clutch S-tronic transmission was super smooth. Of course, that adds to overall fuel efficiency of the entire powertrain. And it just felt really, really good. Drawbacks, pretty much only subjective in my opinion. I don't love the design. I mean, it's fine. It fits with the other Audi Q models. Could it be more distinctive? In my opinion, absolutely. And then on the interior, sort of same thing. I actually like the interior design execution a lot. I don't like the mix of materials in some places. A little bit too much piano black for my taste, especially on the steering wheel. I think the overall new Audi steering wheel needs a bit of a rethink. The implementation of the badge and the buttons and some other haptic controls there are not very good. But that's really it. The only other thing that I thought was a bit surprising was that with all the driver assistance features added to this car as standard, along with the optional assistance pack, it doesn't have auto hold feature for holding the brake when you're at a stoplight. That seems a bit surprising. A lot of cars in segments like this and below do have that feature, so that was a bit odd. But otherwise, I think it's a really compelling package. So would I buy one if I was in the market for the new Q3? Yeah, I think I would. Nothing really appeals to me too much from the direct competitors. Definitely not the Mercedes-Benz GLA. Maybe the X1 comes closest. But this is ultimately the newest product. and it's the most competent version of that segment of vehicle, that sort of A segment luxury crossover entry level point that you can get. And the value is pretty strong. I mean, $43,000 starting point. As equipped, you're definitely getting closer to $50K after destination and some of the popular packages that people have been adding to these Q3s. But I think if you're in the market for it, it's definitely a strong option. And thanks, of course, to Audi of America for inviting me out to this beautiful location here to drive the new Q3. Hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.